Hi guys, welcome to the next video in the Change Challenge series. This week we're going to be taking a look at meal planning and eating out. So as we've discussed previously in the presentations, how you structure your day and your meal plan will be dependent on your goal and what your preferences are ultimately. So if you remember previously back to that pyramid of the structure and the hierarchy of building a diet where calories are at the bottom, underneath all of that is a flexibility, sustainability and your preferences. Ultimately, if this program fits within your preferences and fits within your lifestyle, then you're going to be able to adhere to it much better. It's going to be better in the long term in terms of sustainability and maintaining it. So if your goal is to lose weight, then you may want to consider some options in terms of foods that would be calorie sparse, higher in fibre, protein that would cause satiation and help with calorie restriction. If your goal is the opposite, to gain weight, then you may want to look at how you could include some higher calorie, more calorie dense foods or fortifying your foods with those kinds of foods to help you get to the calorie surplus. Ultimately, every single diet or meal plan, etc., should have the emphasis of health, flexibility, and sustainability. So how you distribute your calories throughout the day, again, is based on your preference. Here's 3 different models that you can see just on the screen, where the calorie consumption is very nearly the same, and you could see that on some of them, the first one for example, there's 2 meals of a similar size in terms of calories, a snack of similar size again, and then an evening meal slightly higher in calories. However, the distribution in the middle one is slightly different, where we've allowed for a slightly bigger lunch, but a much bigger evening meal by taking some calories away from that snack and from the breakfast. The third option is just an equal distribution through the day of calories, with no snacks in there. So depending on your work schedule, when you may be training, it's ultimately up to you how you distribute these calories over the 24-hour period. The calories that you would have calculated for your goal in the previous presentations and your protein intake that you would need, you just need to distribute those throughout the day. And sticking with some of the things that we would have already stipulated, a minimum of 30 grams of protein at each main meal. If we're getting as precise as monitoring carbohydrates and fats, then we could look at how we could structure those throughout the day, more with carbohydrates closer to training and fats maybe distributed throughout the day. So you will have seen this table which contains examples of different foods in the macronutrient groups, with the protein ones on the left, carbohydrate in the middle and fats on the right. And ultimately, to build a meal plan, we're going to be taking the different foods from each group, providing alongside some of the nutrient-dense, fibrous foods that you can see on the right-hand side, and going to be building a meal plan from there. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list of all of the foods within those groups. You don't have to consume any of the foods that you can see on this slide, or you could consume everything on here and nothing else. It's completely up to you, but it's an example of the different foods that fall into those categories. There is a blend between the categories as well. So for example, you can see cheese in the fat column. However, that would also provide some protein, and similar to eggs in the protein column would also provide some fat. Again, in the carbohydrate column, certain things such as the baked beans, legumes, lentils would all provide protein as well. But that's the main macronutrient that they'll pretty much be providing in the column that they're in. So as I said, we're going to go from a meal plan that would look like this currently, with no distribution of your calories or macronutrients, to something that may look like this. So as you can see, there's a range of breakfast, lunch, dinners and snacks on there, all in varying calorie contents. And what I've done to help you start to be able to piece together the macronutrient table that you will have just seen is highlighted the different macronutrients that are contained in that meal and put the calorie figure for that meal there. So if you take a look at Wednesday morning's breakfast, it is the Greek yogurt with some whey protein and some mixed berries. So the Greek yogurt is highlighted in blue to show it's the protein, and the mixed berries are in the red for the carbohydrates. And I've done that throughout there. If you look at the snack on Wednesday, which is dark chocolate, that stayed in black because the key that I gave for fats is black, so that will majority provide the fat as a macronutrient for that snack. So to give you a bit more of an example of this and break some of these meals down further. Here, the goal at this meal of distribution of my calories and protein for the day was 400 calories approximately, and to get that 30 grams of protein. So you can see the meal is Greek yogurt with some whey protein mixed in and some berries. And that provides about 33 grams of protein, 40 grams of carbs, and minimal fats. If you look on the right hand side, the sources of protein that I will have built this meal around will be Greek yogurt and the whey protein, the carbohydrates included with the mixed berries, and if I did want to include some fats, what I could do is put some flaxseed in there or some chia seed. So this is how we're going to be building the meals and building that meal plan from what your calorie and macronutrient targets are. Now again, as we've discussed, the most basic of tracking would be the calories only. The next level would be the calories and protein, and the most inclusive one would be all the calories and all of the macronutrients. So here is an example of building a meal just based on the calorie content and on the protein content. The carbohydrates will just total up through the day to help me meet my total calorie content. In the next example, you could see the calorie target was slightly higher for this meal. The protein target was still at 30 grams of protein, but I wanted it to be slightly higher carb because I'm going to be training not long after. So here there was some homemade burgers with sweet potato fries, and that comes to around 430 calories, hitting that protein target and having slightly higher carbs than the fats. And as you can see on the right hand side, under the macronutrient categories, the beef mince was the source of protein, which you could also argue provided some fat as well. The carbohydrates was the sweet potato, and some of the olive oil would have been used to cook the sweet potato in. So here you can see how, starting with that source of protein, again with the beef mince for the burger, to make sure I meet that protein target, I can then meet the other requirements of that meal, such as a higher carbohydrate, and then use that carbohydrate content to meet the calorie target for that meal. So some tips, and we would have gone through some of these last week with the food label and food shopping, but some things that you might want to always have in the kitchen are some examples here, and these will just kind of help you and supplement around that meal planning. When we're looking at the macronutrients to plan the meals, we're looking at the sources of protein, carbohydrates and fats, but these things will always be useful for you when you're preparing your meals. Spray oil if you were going to be making scrambled eggs, for example, olive oil for the sweet potato fries, some different condiments and flavours that you might use just to make sure meals aren't becoming plain and bland, and herbs, spices and seasoning. There's some different examples there. When we take a look at meal prepping, here's some examples. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make every single meal and then consume that meal one by one. It can sometimes be good, and if you take a look back at the earlier slide where the completed meal planning was there, you'll see that, for example, I use a double cooking method to cook one evening meal, but double the ingredients, and that would have given me the lunch for the next day, meaning that I didn't have to prepare that or go out and source it. You could do something, for example, like bulk cooking. So one morning you could cook all of the sausages, and then you could have them distributed over the next few days using a slow cooker or some of these bulk cooking seasoning bags. It's a really, really good option for you to be able to plan a lot of meals all at once, or be able to have some kind of convenience when you are planning your meals, saving you having to source meals out. So for example, with the seasoning bags, you can cook 4 chicken breasts at once, and that could be then 4 lunches for the next few days, and all you have to source is the remaining carbohydrates and fats to meet your calorie goal for that meal. So here's another task that is really, really good to go through when you are looking at meal planning. It is a snack idea sheet, and similar to the meal plan, it's a really good and valuable task for you to go through and complete. And this can be great for when you haven't had chance to prepare, you haven't planned a meal, or for whatever reason you're unable to have the meal that you did plan. Now, depending on what your goals are for that meal, as we've discussed, it may just be that you don't want any carbohydrates in that meal. So you just be looking at protein and fat. So there's 2 boxes there where you could complete a protein and fat example. You may not want any fats, it may be slightly closer to training, and fats would slow digestion, making you feel slightly sick during training. So you would just want protein and carbohydrates. There's 2 boxes there for protein and carbohydrates. And right at the bottom, there's 2 boxes for all 3 macronutrients if you wanted a slightly more balanced snack or meal. Now, what a great thing to do is places of convenience for you. So if you have a co-op near where you work, if you walk past a Tesco, if Asda's where you do your food shopping, is to go around and spend some time completing this table and having some quick, easy go-to snacks for the reasons that I previously mentioned. The great thing about this is if you haven't prepared, then you'll be able to just go in and source these. And what I also want you to do is that consider that it doesn't have to be one item. So the protein and fat does not have to be one item. It could be a packet of chicken with some dark chocolate, and you're meeting the protein there, and then you're meeting the fat. It could be Greek yogurt with some dark chocolate in there. For the protein and carb, it could be Greek yogurt with with a chopped up naked bar. So it doesn't have to be one single item, but equally at the same time, it could just be a protein flapjack that you source from Asda. That could be a protein and carb snack. So being savvy with calories is another good thing to consider when you're looking at planning your meals. And here's some examples that if you're trying to have slightly reduced calories, including lentil pasta, legumes, courgette vegetables, cauliflower rice, are all good options to reduce the calorie intake for that meal. It could be that you want to have a slightly lower calorie lunch because you're going to save the calories for later in the evening if you're going out for a meal. They'll also provide you some carbohydrate content and some protein, especially the lentil pastas, the legumes. So it may be a way of you sourcing that protein figure that you need for that meal as well. Some other good options could be including Greek yogurt. It's a really, really good source of protein and very low calorie. Protein pancakes, protein porridge, cottage cheese, etc. are all much lower in calories and will provide you a good amount of protein. So when you're considering and taking time to put together your meal plan, some of these items probably really, really good to include in there if calorie restriction is one of your goals. So we're going to take a look at eating out now. So it's decision time really to decide whether you're going to maintain and keep on track with your calorie and macronutrient targets, or you're going to have a meal off plan. There's positives and drawbacks for each side. On the one hand, you'll maintain momentum towards your goal, slightly more difficult option, but it is possible. If you're going to be taking a meal off your plan, it is a great psychological break. If you factor it in, it may not have that much of a significant impact, and it is a slightly easier option than trying to calculate all of the calories and macronutrients at that meal. If, for example, you were going to go out for lunch every single day of the week, what I might suggest is that you actually try and maintain on track with your calories and macronutrient goals, because this is a bit more of a regular occurrence. If it was once a fortnight that you were going to be spending some time with friends and socialising, maybe it is slightly better to take that meal off the plan. And there's certain things that we can do to try and limit the impact that it would have towards your goals. I'm going to go through them soon. So some of the variables when you're eating out that might have a significant impact on the calories that you consumed and the different macronutrients that would be within those foods, or the different portion sizes, how it may be cooked, the different oils it may be cooked in, the drinks that you may even get. Sometimes they may contain a lot more sugar, different sauces and condiments, and the different kind of meats that you may be being served. From the difference from chicken breast to chicken thigh would be significant in terms of calories and fat content. So these are different variables that are somewhat outside of your control when you are dining out. So here's a step-by-step guide of what we're going to do if we're eating out, if we're trying to keep on track with our plan. Now, this is a very, very similar guide to what you would be doing when you're creating each meal for your meal planner. And essentially, it's the same process that you would go through, but you're just not preparing the food. So if possible in advance, if you know where you're going to be eating out, maybe take a look at the menu. A lot of places now have nutritional values, calorie content on their websites and on their menus. So if you are trying to keep within a certain calorie window, then that can be great for you initially to get an idea of the different content within the foods. Consider the rest of the meals in that day. If you've had a much lower calorie breakfast and lunch, then you'll be able to save some calories for later in the evening for this meal. So the initial thing that we're going to do, as we do with the meal planner, is look at a source of protein and find a source of protein that's going to allow us to achieve our protein target for that meal. We're then going to add some bulk to the meal with some vegetables before we consider any other macronutrients, and this will stop us from feeling hungry and fill us up. Then we can supplement the meal with the carbohydrates and fats, dependent on what you've done through the rest of the day. So if your carbohydrate target for the day is 150 grams and you've nearly had all of those, then maybe you want to look at just including some fats, and vice versa. If you've had eggs for breakfast and other high fat foods and your carbohydrate goal hasn't really been met through the day, maybe you could include certain things like rice here or pasta, or even some form of pizza that could kind of help bump up your carbohydrate intake. So it's just dependent on what you've already done throughout the rest of the day. And don't be afraid to ask for substitutes, things to be left off, cooking methods. Some places may grill certain things for you instead of frying, etc. Including extra vegetables. They're all good ideas to do as well for the meal. And if you are trying to stick within a calorie target and you're not trying to be too strict in terms of counting what you're consuming, maybe just sticking to a couple of options. So having a starter and a main, or a main and a dessert. If you're going to be including alcohol, maybe just one of those three and alcohol in there as well. And that will just kind of help you limit portion size and control calories without actually having to track every single calorie that you're eating. So if you do plan on tracking it, most chain restaurants now will have some figures available on either their website or through the MyFitnessPal as well. So an example, you can see here Nando's on the MyFitnessPal have all of their nutritional information, and it's really easy to track there. All of their sides and anything available on the menu you can find on MyFitnessPal, so it wouldn't be too difficult to be able to track that meal. If you haven't gone somewhere that's as popular or doesn't have nutrition information available, then you could always use similar information from somewhere like that to track your meal. So let's say wherever you've gone doesn't have nutritional information, but you did have some kind of chicken with rice, then you could just use the Nando's equivalent from MyFitnessPal and be fairly confident that it's probably a similar value. If that's not possible at all, maybe taking a look at the meal as its components. So if you were to get a mixed grill and that included chicken, lamb and beef, maybe look at how you could include or track those, searching for the chicken first, the beef, then the lamb, and the different components of that meal. And you could either do that with the chain restaurants again, or items from supermarkets. So if you were to have sweet potato fries and you couldn't find them through the chain restaurants tracking information, you could use Tesco's generic sweet potato fries as a value to track it. So if you aren't tracking it, the one way that we can help you keep it towards your goals would be reducing the calorie consumption earlier in the day. So if you were to have a calorie target each day of 1600 calories, for example, and you had 300 calories at breakfast and 300 calories at lunch, you've then got 1000 calories for that evening meal, which would probably be more than sufficient enough for a main meal and a dessert. So the way you structure your day, as you've seen earlier, we had the 3 different examples where we could consume slightly lower calories in the morning to then give us some calories saved up for later in the day. We could do something similar to that to be able to save some calories for this meal. And most importantly, enjoy it. If you're not going to be tracking it, it's more than likely that you're going to be socialising. Just enjoy it and have a nice psychological break from having to track and monitor and plan all of your meals. So that basically brings together everything for the meal planning and eating out. Quick summary is that we have gone through building a meal plan and how we do that by looking at the targets of that meal and the distribution of your calories and macronutrients through the day. And for each meal we will have a target which is basically what you have decided upon yourself, depending on how you want to structure the day. You'll have a calorie target, a protein target. You may have carbohydrate and fat target for each meal. You will first look at how to build the meal around that serving of protein, then including some micronutrient rich foods, carbohydrates and fats, and you'll do that for each meal and the snacks as well. We've gone through the snack guide and the template there, and that's really good if you're stuck and not able to have one of the meals that you prepared or you haven't prepared, because we've planned for that event. We've then looked at eating out, and it's a very similar method if you are going to be tracking it, and even if you don't track it, you can still go through those stages of looking at the source of protein, adding in some micronutrient rich foods, some carbohydrates and fats, and then that will build your meal. So whether you track it or not, we've got the two different options there for that, but we can still have an optimal meal if we are eating out. So I'll be looking forward to taking any questions on the Facebook page, and I'll see you next week, guys.